Hello, welcome to another episode of Africa Update, reaching you from our studios here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And this week on the program, we'll be telling you and giving you an update on what's happening in our beautiful black continent. To stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa Update here on Trust TV. I'm your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. As I said before, we'll be doing an update on what's happening on the continent. We'll start off with Ivory Coast. The Ivorian government has announced a ban on public gatherings and demonstrations opposing the exclusion of several high-profile opposition leaders from the October 25th presidential election. The decision follows the Constitutional Council's release of the final list of approved candidates. Those barred from the ballot include Tidjane Thiam, a former Credit Suisse chief and leader of the Democratic Party of Ivory Coast, PDCI, ex-President Laurent Gbagbo, Charles Ble Goude, and Guillaume Soro. Thiam was disqualified after a court ruled he still held French nationality at the time of registration, despite renouncing it earlier this year. The exclusions have triggered protests in parts of the country. In Abidjan's Yopougon district, demonstrators carried banners reading "Enough is enough" and "No true democracy without true justice," demanding the reinstatement of the affected candidates and a more inclusive election process. Authorities argue the restrictions are necessary to maintain order, accusing opposition rallies of spreading misinformation and fueling unrest. Critics, however, warn that the move undermines democratic principles and risks inflaming political tensions. It is still unclear whether the disqualified candidates will be able to challenge the decision successfully, either through domestic legal appeals or international pressure. Developments come as Ivory Coast prepares for a closely watched election, seen as a key test of its democratic institutions after past episodes of post-election violence. Still on election matters, we go over to Central Africa, where thousands of supporters of the ruling MCU party gathered in Bangui on Thursday as President Faustin Archange Touadéra formally submitted his candidacy for the December 28 presidential and legislative elections in the Central African Republic. Touadéra, the first candidate to file, thanked citizens for their encouragement. On December 28, I hope all this commitment, all this support can be reflected in the ballot box, Touadéra told the crowd, expressing confidence in his bid for a third term. The demonstration drew supporters from across the capital, with resident Chiedera Zimungo describing the mobilization as unprecedented. For the first time, we stood behind our president to accompany him as he went to submit his candidacy, she said. The opposition, however, has sharply criticized Touadéra's decision to run again, insisting that dialogue is essential to ensure the election is properly organized and credible. And just at the outskirts of our great continent, still in Africa though, is Madagascar, the Gen Z protest taking place. Protests over basic needs like electricity and water escalated in Madagascar since last week, leaving at least 22 dead in clashes with police. The island nation of Africa's east coast remains among the world's poorest. Take a look.
Demonstrations demanding change have swept across Madagascar. Thousands of mainly young protesters began taking to the streets on Thursday. They have a clear message to President André Rajoelina, who first came to power following a coup sparked by an uprising.
They say we are a TikTok generation, a generation of idiots. And when we rise up, they don't let us speak out about the country's problems. A message for you, Mr. André Rajoelina. When you led the protest, they let you do it. Hey, but when we young people fight for the country, you stop us.
Authorities with force to the protests, using tear gas and reports of beatings and mass detentions. The unrest has escalated to arson and looting in some areas. Many protesters want better access to water, electricity in Madagascar. The island nation off Africa's east coast is among the world's poorest countries and faces high levels of poverty. Some conditions have worsened since Rajoelina took office in 2019. Amid calls for his resignation, he said he had listened to demands and fired his entire government on Monday.
Therefore, in accordance with Article 54 of the Constitution, I have today taken the decision to dismiss the Prime Minister and dissolve his government.
But the move does not appear to have satisfied protesters, called for fresh demonstrations. UN Human Rights Commissioner Volker Turk has urged authorities to respect freedom of expression and the right to peaceful assembly. The UN reports killings and more than 100 injuries in protests so far, a tally that Madagascar's government rejects.
Still on protest matter over in North Africa, in Morocco, anti-government protests in the country escalated violently on Wednesday, leaving 3 people dead after security forces opened fire on a group attempting to storm a police station in Leclerc, near the coastal city of Agadir, state media has reported. Authorities say the group, armed with knives, set part of the facility ablaze, prompting officers to respond with live fire in what they described as self-defense. A judicial investigation has been opened. The unrest marks the deadliest turn yet to demonstrations that began over the weekend, with young people rallying against poor healthcare, weak education systems and deep social inequalities. Morocco's Interior Ministry said more than 400 protesters have been arrested and nearly 300 injured since the rallies began. The protests are being coordinated by anonymous youth-led networks such as Moroccan Youth Voice and Gen Z 212, which have used TikTok, Instagram and Discord to mobilize crowds. Demonstrators accuse the government of prioritizing preparations for the 2030 FIFA World Cup, including stadium construction, while neglecting public services. Morocco's unemployment rate is 12.8%, but youth joblessness stands at 35.8%, with 19% among graduates. Anger has also been fueled by recent deaths of several women at a public hospital in Agadir, intensifying criticism of the country's healthcare system. In Somalia, the UN World Food Programme, WFP, announced Friday reducing food assistance in the country, where millions are grappling with hunger driven by climate change, conflict and insecurity. The number of people receiving emergency food aid will fall from 1.1 million in August to just 350,000 in November, the agency said, citing critical funding shortfalls. According to UN data, 4.6 million Somalis face crisis levels of hunger, including 1.8 million children projected to suffer acute malnutrition this year. Of those, 421,000 are at risk of severe malnutrition, while WFP has so far reached only 180,000. Somalia's crisis is compounded by recurrent droughts, devastating floods, and decades of insecurity, with Al-Shabaab militants still controlling parts of the country. Aid workers also point to U.S. foreign aid costs as an additional blow to humanitarian operations. WFP says it urgently requires $98 million to sustain life-saving food assistance for at least 800,000 people through March 2026. Wow, that's quite a very sad one there. Hopefully something will be done and that situation could, turn around for the better. Now we're going to go on a short break, and when we return, more stories. Just stay with us. Welcome back from that break on Africa Updates. Now to more stories. We're going over to Ghana, where since 2019, Ghana has actively invited people of African descent, whether to visit or resettle. Its year of return and beyond the return campaigns generated billions of dollars in tourism revenue. Now, the government's Black Stars Experience initiative wants to attract even more visitors and investors. Please take a look.
So in terms of me coming back to Ghana, I am not one of those people who will sugarcoat it and say it's been a smooth road. You reach a lot of roadblocks, people not where they're supposed to be, pay longer than it should. It makes it hard to live as an individual, and also for people like me who are entrepreneurs, it makes it hard for you to make a true society because it limits your ability to create jobs.
At our office of the Diaspora Affairs, the presidency, we're there as facilitators to make this happen. And it doesn't matter where you find yourself in the world, we have a 24-hour hotline where people can call from wherever, whatever your challenges are, whatever your needs are, be it legal support, health, what have you. We're there as facilitators to make Ghana a very comfortable place for you to reside. If we're very intentional with the diaspora, we could do a lot with them. And it's not just getting them to bring in funds, remittances, but also being intentional to make them part of nation building. It's the reason we're having this year's Diaspora Summit.
We are advocating for the right of any African born outside of the continent to return home because one, they want to. Two, they may want to make contributions as far as raising their children here or doing business, but for whatever the reason, they have a right to return. This is an international principle.
Very lovely idea there from Ghana. Now let's come back home here to Nigeria, where a staple cuisine could feed space travelers. The African Space Agency aims to help existing space programs from individual countries collaborate and to supercharge the continent's space ambitions. Egusi seeds, a staple of Nigerian cuisine, are helping scientists to develop the future of space travel. Take a look.
For most Nigerians, egusi soup is a tasty tradition. But could this simple one-pot dish soon be served up among the stars? Melon seeds used to make the soup were blasted into space in August as part of an experiment. They were chosen by entrepreneur Temidayo Oniosun, and now he's hoping a reality.
The goal is that, in the next couple of decades, when people are living on the moon or on the Mars, and they're looking at growing food and all of that, food that are native to Africa would be part of that. So even in 50 years' time, Africans are living on the moon, we want them to be growing and planting egusi and be eating.
Now, back on Earth, scientists are carrying out tests on the batch of Nigerian egusi seeds sent into orbit.
So we're figuring out, can the plants adapt to microgravity? And if they can, that will be of value for astronauts for long-term missions, like going to Mars or going back to the moon. Because especially for Mars, which is a long trip, astronauts need to have a good source of nutrients. So having a variety of food crops that they can grow in space, that will be of value to them.
For Africa, seeds are also symbolic of the continent's growing space ambitions, a cultural tradition helping to shape the future.
And from West Africa, we go over to South Africa, where in Namibia, a massive wildfire that ravaged the Etosha National Park, a major tourist center and ecological reserve, has now been contained. The fire destroyed over 1/3 of the park and killed countless of animals. Let's take a look. Still dealing with environmental and conservative issues, South Africa's African penguin population has fallen to fewer than 9,900 breeding pairs, sparking fears the species could disappear within a decade. Once numbering in the millions, the penguins are being pushed toward extinction by overfishing of sardines and anchois, habitat loss and predators. At Stony Point Colony near Cape Town, researchers are testing artificial nests to boost survival rates. Artificial nests are used to lessen environmental exposure when penguins are breeding, to protect them from predators and to help safeguard their chicks and eggs. A landmark court ruling this year compelled South Africa's government to create no fishing zones near key colonies, aimed at reducing food competition during the breeding season. While conservationists, welcome the closures, concerns remain. Once juveniles fledge, they travel long distances to find food, but with little hunting experience, their survival rate is already below 50%. If food is scarce, the chances drop even further, according to conservation manager at Sankob, Nikki Stander. Experts warn that stricter fishing limits will be essential to prevent extinction. For now, conservationists hope the new protections will buy time for Africa's only penguin species to recover. Still another animal that about to go under is Africa's freshwater fish. Africa's freshwater fish are vanishing at alarming rates, with more than a quarter of species now at risk of extinction, according to a new Worldwide Fund for Nature WWFP report. On Lake Victoria, the continent's largest lake, fish catches have fallen sharply. Local traders say the crisis is already hitting livelihoods. The report, Africa's Forgotten Fishes, cite overfishing, invasive species and pollution as major drivers of the decline. In Lake Victoria alone, more than 200 chicholed species have already disappeared, while illegal nets continue to deplete juvenile stocks. The problem extends far beyond Lake Victoria. In the Zambezi floodplain, catches are down 90%, while populations of Chambo tilapia in Lake Malawi have dropped 94%. Freshwater fish are a cornerstone of food security, income, and ecosystem health across Africa, but conservation has long been underfunded compared to marine fisheries. WWF is calling for an emergency recovery plan, prioritizing clean waterways, curbing invasive species, and halting unsustainable fishing. Scientists warn that the next decade will be decisive. Either Africa restores its inland waters or risk losing many species forever. And finally, we leave with this story from the sports world, where South Africa's Caster Semenya has ended her long-running legal battle, that's the Olympic, against track and field sex eligibility rules. Her lawyer confirmed Thursday. The decision comes 7 years after she first challenged the regulations which barred her from competing in her specialist 800-meter unless she took medication to lower her natural hormone levels. Semenya, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, was banned from the event at major international competitions in 2019 under rules introduced by World Athletics. She has since fought the regulations through several courts, arguing they violated her rights. Her appeals were rejected by both the Court of Arbitration for Sports and the Swiss Federal Tribunal. However, in July, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that she had not been given a fair hearing, offering her a potential path to continue her case. Despite that ruling, Semenya's legal team says they will not take the appeal back to Switzerland. Now 34, the former middle-distance star has turned to coaching, with the regulations effectively bringing her competitive career to an end. Oh well, that's it. And that ends Africa Update today on Trust TV. For more of our news programs, documentaries, do well for us on social media platforms and on our YouTube live stream. I've been your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Same time, same place next week. Bye for now.